We finally thought the NFA tax was gone for good, a hard-earned win that dropped the old $200 suppressor stamp to zero. But now DC is trying to drag it back from the grave at nearly $5,000 a pop, and they're sneaking it into a defense bill like it's some kind of landmine. What's up, everyone? This is Ted from Line 45, and today, we're talking about how DC just tried to booby-trap our win, sneaking a $5,000 suppressor tax into a defense bill like it's a landmine, and if it blows, it'll wreck every gun owner's wallet in the country. Before we dive in, do me a solid. Smash that subscribe, tap the bell, hit all the dang buttons down there. You don't gotta, but it keeps this train rolling and lets me crank out more of this wild gun talk for y'all. All right, enough of that. Let's get back to it. From victory to ambush. Boys, we thought we finally smoked a win out of DC. Back in July 2025, Congress rammed through H.R. 1, and tucked inside that beast was a nugget we'd been chasing for decades. The $200 NFA tax stamp on suppressors, SBRs, and SBSs was nuked down to zero, gone, dead. For the first time since 1934, the government wasn't shaking you down just to screw a can on the end of your rifle. And starting the 1st of January, 2026, that freedom was set to kick in for every one of us. Now, let's not forget how big that was. $200 in 1934 was like $4,000 today. That tax wasn't about safety. It was a straight-up ban by pricing folks out. For 90 freaking years, it kept suppressors locked up as toys for the rich and the Hollywood villains. Cutting it to zero was more than a policy shift. It felt like somebody in D.C. finally remembered the Constitution. But here's the gut punch. While we were high-fiving and breaking out the celebratory range ammo, Senator Chris Murphy out of Connecticut was sharpening his knife. And he didn't just want to bring the tax back to the old $200. Nah, he wants to crank it all the way up to $4,799 a pop. That's his inflation adjustment, which as politicians speak for, how do we make sure regular gun owners can't touch this stuff again? But you know what? Murphy didn't stop at bringing the old tax back. He went digging through history books, dusted off the 1,934 numbers, and came back swinging with a figure that'll make your jaw hit the floor. The $4,799 price tag. So here's the part that'll make you spit your coffee. Senator Murphy wants the tax on suppressors set at $4,799. Not $200 like your granddad's era, not even a modest bump. Straight into used car money for a single can. And how'd he land on that? He took the original $200 tax from $1,934, adjusted it for inflation, saw it came out around $4,500, and decided, heck, let's round up. That's the math, if you can even call it that. Now picture what that does in the real world. Most folks already think twice about dropping $800 to $1,200 on a decent suppressor. Add almost $5,000 on top just to register it, and suddenly suppressors are right back where they were in the 1,932nd, locked up as toys for the wealthy or the guys with trust funds. Regular shooters, hunters, vets on a budget, completely priced out. And that's exactly the effect Murphy's banking on. And it doesn't stop with cans. His amendment also cranks the AOW or any other weapon fee from $5 to $55. Doesn't sound like much compared to $5,000, but the whole point is death by 1,000 cuts. If they can normalize inflation-adjusted fees here, they'll use the same trick on mags, ammo, and even optics down the road. The crazy part? He's not even running this through a clean debate. He's trying to slip it into the National Defense Authorization Act, the must-pass military budget bill. How it's being snuck in. Now, this is where it gets slicker than a greased pig. Murphy knows there's no way he could stand in front of America and win a straight-up vote on a $4,799 suppressor tax. Folks would laugh him out of the room. So instead of swinging for it head-on, he's trying to bury this thing in the National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA. That's the massive must-pass spending bill that keeps the lights on for the Pentagon. Every senator and congressman knows voting no on it is political suicide, because you look like you're turning your back on the troops. And that's the game here. Sneak a tax hike into a bill that funds the military, sit back, and hope nobody catches it until it's too late. It's legislative camouflage. Make the gun control rider small enough, tuck it in the folds of a 1,000-page defense budget, and then dare your opponents to peel it out. If they miss it, boom. You've got yourself a backdoor gun tax without ever running it through the proper debate. Now here's the kicker. If this thing latches onto the NDAA and makes it through, it doesn't just undo the $0 win we thought we had. It wipes it clean off the books before it even takes effect on the 1st of January, 2026. That's not just a step backward. That's a trapdoor opening right under our feet. And while it might sound like a long shot today, the real danger is what happens after the next election cycle. Political reality check. Look, I'll shoot you straight. This thing ain't sailing through tomorrow. Election season's in full swing. The House is red, and half the Senate ain't about to put their name on a $5,000 gun tax right before voters hit the booth. Murphy knows he doesn't have the numbers today. This move? It's more about loading the chamber and waiting for the perfect shot. And here's the ugly truth. That shot could come out of nowhere. All it takes is one bad headline, some dirtbag misusing a suppressor, and the media will hand Murphy the narrative on a silver platter. Suddenly, that $4,799 tax sounds like common sense safety to folks who don't know a muzzle from a magazine. Add in the 2026 midterms. If Democrats snag 51 seats, they don't need a single Republican. Through budget reconciliation, they can ram it through with a bare majority and dare anyone to stop them. That's why I call it a landmine. It's buried deep in the weeds right now, but the second the ground shakes, it blows. And if it blows, that $0 tax win we celebrated turns to smoke overnight, replaced with the fattest NFA fee in American history. Now here's where it gets scarier. This ain't just about suppressors. If they pull it off once, they'll have the playbook to tax everything else we own. What's at stake beyond suppressors? This is where the mask comes off, boys. If you think Murphy's stunt stops at suppressors, you're living in a fairy tale. That $5,000 tax is the pilot program, which is the test run. If they can sneak it in and survive the backlash, they'll run the same play on everything else we care about. Mags? Inflation, adjusted. Ammo? Inflation, adjusted. Optics? Red dots. Even AR lowers. All fair game once the door's cracked. They don't gotta ban it if they can price you out of it. And let's not forget what suppressors actually are. They ain't assassin gear, they're safety tools. They keep recoil down, they save your hearing, and they keep the neighbors from calling the sheriff every time you sight in a deer rifle. The ATF's own stats show they're used in basically no crimes at all, fewer than rifles that already get demonized every news cycle. So when Murphy spins this as public safety, it's a straight lie. The real play here is control through cash. Here's the deal. If they normalize the idea that freedom gets an inflation fee, it won't stop with cans. Today, it's $4,799 for a suppressor. Tomorrow, it's a $500 stamp for a 30-round mag. Day after that, a safety surcharge every time you buy a case of 9mm. That's how you strangle the 2 ampere without ever writing the word ban. But did you know that this exact same tactic worked in the 1932nd? Oh, there's history here that is trying to repeat itself. An awful throwback. Let's rewind the tape, because we've seen this movie before. In 1934, the original NFA slapped that $200 tax on suppressors and short-barreled rifles. $200 back then? That was a working man's month-long paycheck. It wasn't about raising money. It was about pricing regular Americans out so only the rich or the connected could get their hands on this gear. And guess what? It worked. From the 32nd through the 72nd, suppressors basically disappeared from civilian life. They weren't banned. But for the average shooter, they might as well have been. Fast forward a few decades, inflation eats away at that number, and suddenly $200 doesn't sting like it used to. That's when suppressor sales finally start climbing again, and groups like the American Suppressor Association push the conversation back toward common sense, that these things are safety tools, not mobster toys. The market rebounds, folks buy cans, and for the first time in generations, suppressors become accessible to everyday gun owners. Now, Murphy's stunt is just the old playbook with a modern calculator. Take that Depression-era tax, drag it into $2,025, and slap it on again to choke out the market without technically banning a thing. History doesn't just rhyme here. It's trying to replay the whole verse. What gun owners do next? So here's where the rubber meets the road. We can sit here and laugh at Murphy's $5,000 fantasy, but if we don't stay sharp, that fantasy turns into the law of the land. Remember, the $0 tax victory doesn't even kick in until the 1st of January, 2026. That means the fight isn't won. It's still wide open, and if we snooze, they'll slip this backdoor tax into a must-pass bill, and erase the win before we even taste it. That's why groups like the Gun Owners of America, Firearms Policy Coalition, and the American Suppressor Association are screaming for backup. It's not enough to celebrate scraps. The only way this ends is by tearing the whole rotten NFA out by the roots. Suppressors, SBRs, SBSs, these aren't gangster toys. They're ordinary tools that keep us safer and make shooting more responsible. We don't need them taxed. We don't need them rationed. We need them treated like the everyday hardware they are. So what do? Stay loud. Stay active. Call your reps. Watch every must-pass bill like a hawk, because that's where the traps get buried. And don't just fight to defend that $0 tax. Fight to end the NFA altogether. Because here's the truth, boys. They didn't kill the NFA tax. They just knocked it down. And right now, the other side's standing over it with a defibrillator, ready to shock it back to life. Question is, are we going to let him?